The book is about how there's been so many incidents throughout history of African Americans who didn't fight with each other but actually cooperated, that we need to stop worrying about that myth. For me, the Willie Lynch letter is a letter from a Jamaican guy who came to the U.S. trying to explain to U.S. plantation owners in the 1700s how best to control their African slaves. And what he said was, as the man just mentioned, you need to divide, figure out how to divide, keep them divided, right? So emasculate the men, have them fight over skin color, have them fight over whether they were in the field or in the house, et cetera. Keep them divided, because if you can't keep them divided, right, obviously they're not going to fall for being enslaved, and they're not going to settle for it. And so I teach that as part of us understanding the white plantation mentality, but I also teach that African Americans have had our own agency. We have retentions from African communalism and African cooperativism. We learned and mixed with that when European cooperative movement came in the late 1800s, and we have used all those notions to bring ourselves out of that condition and to fight against that. So that even though there's probably times and there are instances where African Americans have not felt together and have been divided and conquered, there's also been as many, if not more, instances where we have worked together, or we've worked together and deliberately not to let that happen. And so the one thing that I really loved about the book is that I was able to find so many incidences where African Americans have really worked together, pooling resources, not fighting over money, deciding together on what to do with money, and creating all kinds of institutions, all kinds of economic businesses that really did work.
What you say would be the key components to starting a more youth-focused cooperative, something where you're like maybe grabbing kids at a middle school level, and then you're like building them up through high school so that they're able to like kind of transition to college, or even if they're not going right away to college, like you said, those skill sets and the talents are brought out to where they have the confidence that they want to go to college to go, or they just decide to branch off on their own thing or collaborate with others, their peers, and start something else, or again, meaningful work, knowing how to, they be able to attain meaningful work or see the legitimacy in certain types of training.
The first thing is to get them together to talk about what their community needs or what they need, what they want to do. The second thing is that education, right? Trying to find a way to do great popular co-op education, getting them involved in understanding entrepreneurship, cooperatives, democratic participation, et cetera. And then the third thing is probably having a community of adults to connect with them, either through their church, through their school, through an after-school program, a summer camp, but some adults who are going to work with them, help them, advise them.
There must be a situation where co-ops have to fight back against corporate attempts to get rid of them or intrude on their turf or whatever. And what are the strategies that you have for doing that?
We need more enabling policies at the municipal, state, and federal levels that will really support co-ops, because then it's much harder for people to either undermine you or take away your privileges.
What are your thoughts on globalization and how that could possibly undercut the efforts of cooperatives?
The deindustrialization we've been suffering under, as well as other ways that many of our cities have been asset stripped in terms of corporations and stuff going global and not having any connection to their local. And of course, Detroit is one of those places, right? You've been asset stripped several times over now. But for me, in the current 21st century, globalization actually, I think, now gives us a space for co-ops, because everybody else has abandoned us. In some ways, there is no competition, and in some ways, there is nothing else. So I've often seen co-ops flourish when there was really no other alternative. Sometimes when there were other alternatives, people weren't willing to do the co-op because they were trying to stay in the mainstream. But now that it's clear for a lot of communities that there is no mainstream to be in, that there is no economy to aspire to, they have to create their own economy, I now see that people feel much more empowered and much more the necessity to just take things into their own hands, create what they can with what they have.